In terms of Lawrence and Damon, clearly I started having a discussion with Damon first because at the end of the day we're colleagues, so it's very easy to speak to him, and indeed we've spoken politics for a long time, and because, as I say, Damon and I started in politics 27 years ago, and the initial discussions started that way, and then of course Lawrence was added to those discussions, expressed a desire to speak to me about these things, and indeed we progressed those discussions.
You said this was a hard decision by some. By that, I assume you mean Mr. Feetham. How has he taken the news?
I'm not going to speak for Danny himself because it would be wrong for me to set out the individual position of members of the executive. What I will say is that Danny has behaved really well in this process and indeed has supported me throughout my leadership of this party and continues to do so and continues to do very hard work for this community.
The reason Mr. Llamas left the GSD last year was because the GSD voted against the budget. Have you guaranteed to him this year that you won't be voting against the budget?
I've made no guarantees whatsoever. Indeed, he has assured me that he is committed to the principle of collective responsibility. We as a party will consider how we will vote on the appropriation bill and indeed any other bill going forward. I chair the parliamentary committee of the party under the party's constitution, and we will have that debate in due course and decide on a position which I will expect all MPs to adhere to.
What guarantees have you made to Mr. Bossino, perhaps that he might have the deputy leadership of the party, and to Mr. Llamas that he'll form part of the next lineup?
Not at all. I have given no guarantees whatsoever on issues such as that. Selections of candidates, as I said during the press conference, is a matter for the party's executive, and that's where it rests. Indeed, it includes me. The party executive has to select me, and I will be putting forward my name, but that is where the decision rests.
Well, clearly there's a general election next year and the GSD would like to hoover up as many votes as possible. Mr. Bossino possibly could have branched out on his own. Lawrence Llamas was an independent. Is this a case of keeping your friends close and your enemies closer?
No, this is a case of someone in relation to Damon, who is a member of the party, wishing to become much more active within the party that I lead and giving him the opportunity to do so. And this is about someone who is a member of the family, who was estranged for a period of months, coming back to the fold and seeking to work again within the family. That is exactly what we're doing today.
Mr. Bossino, you have been in the party, you left the party, there was speculation that you were coming back, you decided not to, that happened a few times. Are you in for the long term now?
I think you characterize what's been happening historically in a very bad light, might I say. The reality is that that historically is incorrect. I became a member of the party now, I think 7 or 8 years ago. I stood for the party in 2011. I served in opposition for 4 years. I was deputy leader to Daniel Feetham for, I think it was 2 of those years. And then I decided not to seek re-election to the parliament in 2015. That's all that's happened.
You said you couldn't see how having a leader outside the parliament would work in your podcast, but yet that is exactly the situation that you've found yourself in.
No, that is the situation which Keith, with all due respect, finds himself in.
Yes, the party that you are now part of.
Yes, that's right. That was my view at the time. I felt that would be very difficult to manage. However, we now have the experience of Keith having now done it for 5 or 6 months. I think he's doing a fine job. I think he's doing a very effective job. And I think today is actually a testament to how effective he's being as a leader and in putting into place the things that he's been talking about.
Will you be standing for the next general election, and have you got your eye on the deputy leadership?
Well, in answer to the first limb of your question, I proceed now on the premise that I'm more likely than not to offer myself as a candidate to the executive. It's up to them whether they wish to select me or not. And because, I said, I think in the interview, the interview clip which GBC showed last night, that I enjoyed my time in Parliament, and I have missed it a lot. And from a sort of an egoistical, personal perspective, I would love to go back in. Quite apart from the fact that I think I have something to offer in terms of experience and knowledge to assist the party in its endeavours there. As far as the second limb of your question, well, who knows? It's not a matter, to be very honest with you, it's not a matter which is sort of there in my mind.
And is there any truth to the rumours that you were planning on forming your own political party?
Well, look, no, I've had discussions with members of the GSD and new people whom I was having contact with, because, as I said in the press conference again and in my statement, I have only stepped down. I still continued to have a very keen interest in politics. And of course, in those discussions, you can imagine that people say, oh, why didn't you form a new party? But nothing very serious came of it. And again, today, I think is evidence of the fact that that was something which would not have happened, because I'm now back, most certainly, on a front line and very dedicated and committed basis with the GSD.
So you had thought about it?
Well, no, what I'm saying is that discussions would have been in discussions with people, as happens in Gibraltar. People would have encouraged me to do as you're suggesting, to form a third political party.
Mr. Llamas, you've effectively booked your ticket for another 4 years in Parliament, haven't you?
No, I don't think that is the case. I've always described myself as a conviction politician. I don't consider myself to be a career politician. What I have done is come back to the political home, seeing the changes which are happening. There's been a return of a new leader who used to be in this party as well, a return of another key individual who is Mr. Ballester as chairman, and I think these two individuals have facilitated that return, and it's only natural that, given the circumstances and the changes happening within the party and the mutual desire to rebuild the party, that I should return.
You said in your speech that you held dear the values of the GSD, but when you left the GSD, you said you could no longer identify with these.
Well, that's obviously because the way things were structured back then were very differently. They were changing, and now, given that there's a return of key individuals, as I've just mentioned, those core values are now being repositioned, and what I've seen from Mr. Azopardi's agenda, which he's going to be rolling out in the near future, in his next 200 days, it's very exciting. I identify with them, and I look forward to being part of it.
Have you been welcomed back into the party with open arms by all the MPs?
Well, I mean, look, it's early days. I don't think, there's been hurt on both sides, and obviously that needs rebuilding, and it's something which is happening, and it's happening sooner rather than later. And definitely there have been very, very positive messages being welcoming back into the party. I'm not going to dwell in what has been said. It's water under the bridge. We simply have to move on. There's an agenda, there's a very exciting agenda coming up of policy building, of rebuilding the party, and that is where my focus will be.
Have you had any discussions with Mr. Feetham about your decision to come back?
Look, it's early days. We've all been negotiating and having discussions on how this can work, and if there's goodwill on both sides, then you have to be pragmatic about these things, and I'm more than capable of sitting down round a table with anybody who I need to work along with, and I think that is the way that it will be dealt with, and I think there is definitely a wider interest, which is the interest of this community.
So you've not actually had a conversation with him yet?
No, I haven't. This has only just been decided in the last couple of days. We've just exchanged very brief messages with some of the parliamentary members, and reaching out to the executive. And it's a process which is not going to happen overnight.
What will happen this year if the GSD decides again to vote against the budget? Will you leave?
No, and if you recall, I did not leave because of the voting decision. There were circumstances following that, and that was my decision for leaving the party. It did culminate from the decision on the appropriation bill. However, on this occasion, I am assured that we will have a proper debate on the issue, and I shall act accordingly.